So before we get into the agenda, which will include introductions going around the table and having each member speak for a minute or so, and then a discussion on AIDS, and then on cell phones, and just open-ended Q&A, and then words of advice. That's some pressure. And and then a speed round, actually, during that. We'll start with just talking a little bit about Tuesday's meeting. And some of you may know that it's a relatively new process to have certification on a regular meeting. Until last year, it was done at a special meeting in between the two regular meetings. But having it at the second meeting in April gives some more time for canvass, for election ballots for Muokava voters, military, help me out here, Pete, overseas. Okay, I think there's another part of the acronym, I can't remember, ballots to come in, which can come in, I believe, as late as noon on the day of certification. But what that does, of course, is makes for a pretty hefty agenda on that second regular meeting. And those of you who have taken a look at your binder probably noticed that certification is in the 12s. And it's after a pretty robust consent agenda. And the intent is that we'll get as far as we can, hopefully get through the consent agenda before we take up certification. In the past, too, I know that there have been motions to change the order of the day. That's always a possibility. In one particular instance, the order was changed to allow an outgoing member vote on a particular piece of item before they left. So this is all just a preface to say Tuesday's a wild card, time-wise, right? Don't know.
Get used to it.
Get used to it, says Austin.
Actually, if I might.
Not yet, but
There's the one thing we never do is say when a meeting's going to end. Don't say it's going to end early because it won't.
Okay, that's true. Don't jinx it. Although hopefully we won't. It's hard to imagine we would beat the last record of going until 11 p.m. for the consent agenda, but I don't want to jinx it. Okay, so any questions or comments about Tuesday's agenda and how that might go? Okay, great. Claire, did you want to start by kicking us off with anything since you put together the agenda and did all this work? Sure.
I'm Claire Ross with Legislative Services. I think I've met all the new members now. I am in charge of new member orientation. And so back a couple months ago when we were planning this, we thought since there's such a big transition this year, it'd be really nice to have this session with all of you here together so we can pass on some institutional knowledge. But we wanted to keep it informal and fun. So I have some introduction questions for you to go around the table. So current members, if you could say what you thought it would like to be to serve on the assembly and what it's actually like to serve on the assembly. And then incoming members, is there any particular legislation or issues that you are hoping to work on? Kind of what are your aspirations for the position? So I'll go to Kevin since you're right next to me. Go in a circle.
All right. The first question is the reality versus perception. I thought that it would be a lot more adversarial, but I found everybody to be voracious problem solvers. I found that if I had a question or I had a concern, every one of you guys would stop and answer or point me in the right direction. And I found everybody to be extremely cooperative. And I found the best piece came from turning off social media and not reading the newspaper and just do my job. And I found the group of people I was working with were actually a lot more conducive to getting things done than I anticipated. So I would encourage everybody just to realize that the outside perception and just coming from community councils, I mean, even that perception to now being on this side where when you're on the community council, you're yelling at government, but now that you're government, all your community councils will be yelling at you. So, but that's a good thing, right? And so it's a different perspective. But it's been probably the most learning I've done in such a short period of time, aside from having a full, a couple semesters of college with, trying to knock out 14 credits. So it's like drinking from a fire hydrant at times, but a lot of great help here. Any other questions, concerns, or other things I would tell you is, the agenda packets and those binders that you get have a ton of information in it. And some of that stuff that's coming up, it was way down the pipeline. So it's so important to read those earlier and highlights. If you don't know what it is, ask through the chair, try to get information. And really look at those YouTube videos. Go back if you have a question and you're concerned what a committee does. Watch those YouTube videos. I spent hours and hours and days going back and it still was just grazing the surface. A lot of the problems we're dealing with either started years ago, or there's just layers, and that football's been lateraled many, many times, and there's not simple solutions. And so there's a large learning curve on getting caught up on where we're at and what we're doing to try to resolve those. And so, pay attention to work sessions and things like that. Go back, look at the history of them if you can. You can look at agendas, but be intentional about educating yourself so that you can be useful to your community. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, about 9.5 years ago, when I was convinced to run for the assembly, they told me it was a part-time job. And if any of the new members were convinced with that same argument, it's not true. You can put in unlimited number of hours on this job, and you probably will in some occasions. And Kevin's 100% right about members working together. The perception is definitely different, or the reality is definitely different than the perception. But when you're dealing in politics, perception is reality. So you have to take that into consideration. But I wish you all lots of luck, and get ready to get moved into those offices, because my stuff's all out. Thank you.
Goody. Oh, so you wanted just to know what my main projects, what I thought. So most of you know that I have been very active in my community council and got started with that, trying to look for safe routes, non-motorized routes on the east side of town. The further east you go, the more sketchy non-motorized travel gets. I'm also have been working hard with a neighbor on making the Muldoon corridor, including the Tudors curve, more safe. It's a highway, no matter what the municipality wants to call it, and it's not very safe. You have to pray to pull out of Pioneer Drive or Regal Mountain Drive and hope you're right with the Lord when you hit the road. and then I'm a retired teacher, so supporting students in any way possible is very big on my mind.
Gosh. So I suppose if I had to think about, sort of top of mind challenges I want to address here sooner than later is unsurprisingly, since I come from a public safety background, public safety is important to me. And down in South Anchorage in particular, as we move into our wonderful spring and summer, we're all going to start worrying that our houses might all burn down if and when the Chugach catches fire. And there are some resources, and I think a lot of folks have done some great work to put us on a better track. In particular, we have a PIO at AFD now, or will, that I think will help keep our neighborhoods informed in the event of a crisis, but figuring out ways to mitigate those risks. And then also looking at our police department that expects to be so short-staffed, along with certainly not unique to them within a municipality, but figuring out what do we do about that, and what is the impact to our quality of life. And then, there's plenty more that I could go on with, but those are two that are top of mind for me.
All right, everybody. So Little League Baseball, Pete Peterson, I'm going to continue the strong mantle of championing Little League Baseball. But just seriously, it's a privilege to be with you all. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to share space with the outgoing members. And thank you, Claire, for organizing this work session today. And it's a privilege to be a part of this incoming class. I'm focused on making sure that East Anchorage is a connected, safe, and thriving part of our city. And for me, recognizing that in East Anchorage, especially in the Northeast corridor, where I was the former president of the community council, I know that 5 out of the 6 elementary schools are Title I schools, and that more people are most likely to have 2 jobs than to own 2 homes. So workforce development, economic development are crucial to me. And focusing on workforce development, not only in our community, but also for the municipality, that's a really important element for me, considering we have the top 2 most culturally diverse high schools in the nation. So back to what Karen described, youth development and youth support is critical to me as well. And then equity, recognizing that we have a diverse community, that our Senate district is majority minority, that we have all of that diversity that I highlighted in our schools. I want to make sure that the municipalities work on equity and justice that I was a part of in my previous tenure for the municipality continues. And those are my priority focus areas. Thank you.
Well, in terms of sort of what I thought versus how it turned out, I do think my expectations were pretty well in line. I knew it was going to be a lot of work, and it turned out to be a lot of work. To that extent, and I know for the East delegation, we talked about it ourselves yesterday, so this will be repetitive for you guys, but for the other folks, if you haven't considered getting an assembly aide, I really strongly recommend that. The basically entirety of the resolution congratulating the Betty Davis East basketball team was pretty much spearheaded exclusively by my aide, Arena. And I don't think it would have been done without her. So in terms of sort of insight or advice I would share, it would definitely be look into getting an aide sooner rather than later as well.
Hi, all. So a couple of things I think that are good to remember. Your work will ebb and flow. There will be times when you will be absolutely slammed and feel like you're in it. And then sometimes where other folks are picking it up. And that's okay. Don't feel like you have to do all of it all of the time. And I pick up some irony in that statement as I say it, because I am one of those people who needs to remember that. No, just keep in mind why you're here, really. I set a couple of goals each year of things and policy goals that I really want to accomplish, and I tried to drive towards those. And then the third thing is everyone has their strengths on this body, and really rely on your colleagues who have strengths and expertise in various areas. You can't hold on to all of municipal government by yourself. There is no way. There is so much. So find your passion, find what fills your cup, find what you're good at. It might surprise you what you're good at, frankly. I didn't speak AMATs. Now I'm fluent. So stay open to it. Stay open to the experiences, especially in the first year. I have a love for enterprise and utilities and the port I never thought I would have. I came at this from a social services background. And then I guess last thing on aides, I don't find a general aid very helpful to me, but I find a project-based aid where I can spend my money to have an expert help me dig in deeper, much more useful than someone who can just help me with general tasks. But that's my style. I think there are a lot of different styles for that. Thanks.
Yeah, so I guess for my part, I think I sort of knew what I was getting into having worked in the mayor's office. But I guess what I didn't know working in the executive was sort of seeing behind the curtain of the legislative, which, like, you know, for the legislative, unless you've worked in the executive, you don't really understand behind the curtain in the executive. Austin knows what I'm talking about. One of the things that I didn't realize was just the amazing amount of time that this work takes. it truly is a full-time job. At the same time, you get from it what you put into it. And so, what's the Dick Cheney line that you always quote, Meg?
You can choose to either be a potted plant on the dais or a participant. The choice is yours.
Yeah, so that's a famous Dick Cheney line. Right. So, for me, I knew generally the areas that I wanted to go in heavy on. And so, the little masochist in me, day one, I was the chair of the Housing and Homelessness Committee. And then thankfully someone else came along to take that over. And now I'm that again. Um, so, for folks who know their areas of interest, I think really diving into those, getting involved in those committees, getting to learn the process, I think you'll find a lot. But also at the same time, one of the things that you learn pretty quickly is that as much as you want to spend all your time working on the areas of interest that you are passionate about, you're going to spend almost equally the same amount of time working on constituent issues that just will be coming at you left, right, and center. And then you're going to have to find that balance of working on those constituent issues and then working on all the things that are important to you as well. So, yeah, balance, time, and figure out your scope of passion.
Hi, everybody. I'm Anna Brawley, and I am, as many of you already know, I'm 100% a policy nerd, and I plan to lean into that. So, for better or worse, I suppose. But there's 3 priorities that I have, and certainly, as Felix said, I know it's not just about what I want to do. It's what the city needs. First one is housing. I'm really interested in working on. Revising our zoning code, our building code, really dealing. And I know that those are things that are already happening. And so I'm eager to catch up on what's already been discussed and what is in motion and helping move those things forward. Also really interested in taking a look at our alcohol laws. So many of you maybe know, I was involved at the state level in changing our statutes to modernize our alcohol laws. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to look at our local ordinances as well. So that's something and also that has a deadline. January 1st, 2024 is when a lot of things go into effect and are already in motion. And so I'm interested in working on that. And then the third one is not so much a policy priority, but really interested in community engagement. That's my background as a planner. A lot of planning work, especially the work that I do in my day job, is working with the community. And I think that's really the necessary foundation for actually getting policy done and having it stick, so that you have the community behind you, or at least as many folks as you can. And so I'm really interested in just getting folks involved in local government, understanding how it works, understanding that they can make a difference, and really bringing, to George's point about equity, bringing more people in and making them feel empowered and welcome and included in our processes. And so that's something that I hope to do and will continue to do. Thank you.
Follow up with what Anna said. Having a real estate background, definitely housing is a passion of mine, as you can imagine. So wanting to help, and there's a big learning curve here. I think we all recognize that. So we'll have a lot of, as Kevin mentioned, a fire hose of information coming at us, but want to get caught up on that, and anything I can do to help lend with building development and Title 21 or Title 23 rewrite. Obviously a passion of mine, something I'm interested in. Budget and finance, also something I'm interested in. So I look forward to just learning from those of you that have been doing this for a long time and adding a helping hand where I can.
Well, I think my colleagues have summarized very eloquently the nature of the job. It is fun, it's tough, it's challenging, it's a contact sport at times. Or at least it feels that way at certain yeah. No, it's a lot of, what I mean by that is it can be a lot of tough conversations and strong personalities. But I think, I'm really grateful for, as others have alluded to, the collegial nature of the work that we do, and the collaboration that's involved. And, I think it takes all of us working together, like Kevin was saying, to really make meaningful legislation and better our community. So yeah, it's a lot of work, especially for those of us who wear multiple hats and have other jobs as well. But I think it's rewarding even on the tough days.
So for me, when I started, I was sure I was coming in and I was going to show the man how it worked. I was going to fix the highways. I was going to save my neighborhood. I was going to do transformative work. And then I realized pretty quickly that I was no longer an activist. I was the man. And it really was hard to make that change where you're no longer shouting from the outside, but you're trying to work from the inside. And so you have to realize, I realized pretty quickly, you can do whatever you want, that my priorities were only part of the story, that there are my priorities and then there are the group's priorities and then everyone else has their priorities, and figuring out the critical path to the resources that are available to us is the challenge of navigating all the things that have to get done. The realization that when I came in, I still had this fantasy that government was this well-oiled machine that worked, and that I was coming into a system that was automated in a sense, and I could just pull levers and make things happen. And you realize pretty quickly that we are a group of people trying to do things very humanly, that the outside expectation is that we are a perfect machine. Even though everyone grumbles, you aren't great, they still have an expectation that it's going to work every time, and that it doesn't work like that. And so what that demands is a bit of forbearance on the people who work for us actually doing the work for us to make it so that we can achieve the goals of our constituencies and ourselves. And so there's something to be said about protecting our staff and keeping them safe and comfortable in the work and funding them to be able to do it. And that's true muni-wide, but there's a tension there because there's also the administration, and they have priorities that are different than ours. And sometimes you ask for the same document for 6 weeks in a row and you don't get it and you can't make a critical decision. And then you get really mad, and it's understandable that you're mad, and you tell them that you're mad because what else do you have? And so there's a balance there between being truly expressive of what you're feeling and at the same time making sure that the staff that you need in particular are protected. Also, our resources are limited, and so use them wisely. Everything has a budget line cost, and we're the stewards of the budget, and we have to be eminently conscientious of that. The other thing is, as some have said, you hear about our work and you hear about how we're always fighting with them, with each other, whatever. The only debates the public sees are the debates we don't have unanimity on, but most of our work is unanimous. We adopt 50 or 60 items every single meeting without a word of disagreement. And so the perception is always fighting, always disagreeing, but the reality is agree. We just don't talk about it because we got to spend the time on the things we need to sort out the fine details on. Another thing is the rumors are always, you have this one group that's always in power and they always get what they want, and they lean this way and only that way. But you'll find that the breakdowns are never so discreet. And it's always interesting because you're staring up at that board just waiting to see how they broke. And it's often different than what anybody would assume from the outside. And sometimes you're the only one, and that's okay. Each of us has a role to play. We need everybody as much as possible. We can afford to miss somebody. We can afford to even miss two. But this body works because we are a whole, and it takes a majority to get anything done. We need each of us. And I also thought when I started that I would be able to do everything. You can't do everything. There are limits to your capacity, and find those limits and be respectful of your health and your time and your peace and your family, because your family has to pay just like you do. And so I think those would be my words.
Yeah, it's really interesting, excuse me, to think back to 2017 And I didn't know what I didn't know. Along the same lines as what you said, Pete, I was under the impression it would be a lot less time. I was later told, yeah, we just told you that because you didn't not considered it. But I'm kind of joking because honestly, it's been no. Well, I mean, it's been amazing, and it really is an honor and an opportunity to serve. I mean, that said, it is a lot of work, and I think like what you were saying, Chris, about most of the votes are unanimous, and that surprises people. I mean, if you go and count it up, overwhelmingly way more unanimous. I mean, we joke around and call it the non-consent agenda these days because sometimes so much gets pulled off and there's a lot of discussion. But, you know, John would always say, one of 12, or one of 12. And so there's a lot of opportunity, I think, that also was surprising. Kevin, you said that really well, just about the, you know, the collaboration and how there is, I mean, I think when you start talking about problems, this is what I love about local government. Well, one thing I learned right away was that, wow, nothing unites a neighborhood like a rezone they all hate. And then, you know, there's a lot of unity there. But there's also just a lot of opportunity to work together because we all want to solve these problems. And a lot of that stuff at other levels of government, I think that's more with abstract things, you know, goes away because we're all focused on that. I guess finally, I would say too, in my mind, I think about it. It's hard to think back to the early days because, you know, we had an earthquake. We were just talking about that, Austin, and then the pandemic. And it's like there's this kind of shift, you know, the before time where it was really different, and then going through that really challenging, bumpy period, and then now coming back out where things feel like they're normalizing, I think has made for a very interesting public service experience, for sure. And it's nice to have this opportunity to think back. And thanks for that, Claire.
I wish I wasn't sitting here. I'm coming after Chris and Suzanne, and then Austin comes after me. So I'm not really sure I have much that I can say that will help you. But what I would say is that the Legislative Services Office, the Legal Department, and the Clerk's Office and the Election Office have been, I would have not understood one thing. I would not have gotten anything done. And there would have been no progress forward for me and the people that I represent had it not been for those offices and the people that are so dedicated to the work in those offices. And I would highly suggest that each of you put some money aside to take Barbara out to coffee before she retires and beyond whatever training she's going to give you, and really just listen, because what Barbara brings to the table is amazing, and what you are going to miss by not having her here is unfortunate. I'm not kidding. That is a very firm suggestion. The other thing that I would say is that I've found that taking advantage of there are an unbelievable amount of public invites to everything from school events to community gatherings to, you know, the graduation of the fire training group, and you know, they happen on weekends, they happen in evenings, you have long days of meetings. And while I agree with Chris, you need to have a balance. Going to those events really does sort of affirm why you're doing the work that you're doing. And it also, I think, gives you a conduit to be understood and trusted within the community. So taking advantage, plus they're fun, you know, and they're inspiring. And so I think taking advantage of as many opportunities as those of you can would be great. I think that's it. I'll let Austin finish it off.
Hi, everyone. I think I know or have met all of you, so nice to see you here. I made a list, and there's definitely some overlap. I think that, again, the first top thing was what Kevin said and started with, and Chris and others. We all work really well together, especially since Jamie left. I'm known for being direct, so I'll just get it out there. But really, we're all really collaborative, and even if we don't agree, we're respectful to each other, and that's a really big part of being able to get your work done is working well with people, even if you don't agree with them. And it's been a real joy to get to know everyone here. And we're friends. We joke around. If I have a concert at my house, I invite people. Like we're buddies, and you can't really work in this sort of intense of an environment without becoming friends, I think. And so I think it will be a transition for people who are campaigning. And I realize campaigns are, when you are campaigning, you don't know how it really works and you don't know about all the topics. And it's really, I recall it being so stressful and people like, what's the solution to homelessness? And you're like, I have no idea. Like, I'm just a regular person who hasn't worked on that for 18 years or whatever. And so it's hard. I think campaigning is a really hard environment because you're sort of forced to know the answers to everything. But really, the public servants we want and need are the people who don't know the answers to everything and who show up and ask questions instead. And I think that don't be afraid to ask questions. We don't know everything. It's okay to be learning. And in fact, it's actually better to be a learner and someone who wants to absorb and hear from everyone around you. So be okay with that. And I think to the campaign point, I've seen a lot in the news about partisan bickering and the fighting, blah, blah, blah. And I just want to say that you all will learn once you're here that it's more nuanced than that. And when you are forced to, for instance, demand that the budget you passed is implemented, you will remember, oh, I called that partisan bickering, but actually it's just protecting the municipality. So I can't help but say that because it's been very hard to watch some of that. And you just kind of go, oh, okay, people don't know yet. They don't know what it's going to be like and how hard it is and how nuanced it all is. And one thing that Fred Dyson, whom many of us adore, used to always say is that be careful about thinking you know what your constituents think. People will say that all the time. Well, my constituents, they don't like this development. Well, if you heard from 35 constituents and you have 40,000, I'm guessing you actually don't know what your constituents think about that development. You know what your loud NIMBY constituents think about that development. And so particularly in development and sort of NIMBY neighborhood issues, rezones, housing developments, you will, in my experience, always hear from a group of people who want you to vote against something. Always. That's their job. They just keep showing up and being against change. Please don't fall for it. And don't believe that that's what your constituents think, because it may be, but you can't tell. You just can't tell that from people reaching out, 20 people reaching out to you. You can't tell. And so I guess I would encourage you, and people have different leadership styles. Fred and I recently on a panel, and we were both talking about how try to get away from the crutch of, well, my constituents want me to do this, so I'm going to do it. You are the leader. You were elected by your constituents to be the leader. Do what you think is right and good for this community. Don't get into that trap. That is, it's a recurring theme. So let's see what else. Pay has gotten a little better. It's still really not consistent with how much we all work. We work almost full time, and people like Suzanne for years, and currently Meg, and sounds like maybe Scott. I don't know how full time he is. Dan, Cameron's not here. Sometimes he's not here because he works a full time job. How do you work 2 full time jobs? It's really hard. The one piece that we are lacking is healthcare. Muni employees who work 20 hours a week or more get healthcare, but not assembly members who definitely work 20 hours a week or more. So I have been stirring up trouble on that, which is part of the reason that we got the pay raise, stirring up trouble on that as well. And I've asked Suzanne and Pete to write a letter with me and Barb to the Salaries Commission, calling out that inequity so that you all will get access to healthcare. I don't know what decision they'll make, but we're all planning to do that together since we'll be off the body and won't stand to benefit from it. And Claire's going to help us with that too. Sorry, I'm going on a little here. Just because you're elected doesn't mean when people say, oh, what do you want to work on? It's okay if you don't know. You're a sound, you're a smart person with sound judgment, and you will figure that out. And so don't feel bad if you don't have your issue, because you're the same person. And actually, it's good if you're seeking out, what do my friends and neighbors and mentors and people I've worked with, what are their issues they care about? And it's okay to take time to develop that. You'll get to a point, and Chris kind of said this too, where you'll go, oh, wow, well, surely this can't be the way it's working. Surely someone else is going to fix that, or that has to be wrong. And you'll realize, oh my gosh, that's right. And I'm the person who has to fix it. And that will happen a lot. And it'll be a little discouraging, but also really good to know that you're empowered to make change and to do good in our community. Be as humble and kind as you can be. And that has been a challenge with me, with the administration, because we continue to not get things we ask for. And that is challenging. But I think Chris spoke really eloquently about that line of, we really rely on the admin staff, and we all have a lot of relationships with those staff members. And so trying to navigate the frustration with the political barriers to positive change, trying to also thread that needle with also the fact that you need to have relationships with these people who are a lot of times just trying to do their jobs and are also caught in that. So personality, relationships are everything. And they're what allow all of us to do the work that we do. So people pick up on what kind of person you are and whether you're collaborative or not. And I would recommend you try to be, or you probably won't get a lot done. So I think that's it.
Thank you, everyone. That was really interesting and inspiring to listen to. I do have a pro tip for the new members. If you're going to spend this weekend trying to catch up on topics that you are catch up on topics and watching work sessions, I like to watch them on 1.5 speed afterwards. They go a lot quicker. One time my husband walked by when I was doing that. He's like, your assembly members talk funny. But anyhow, you probably have a lot of catch up to do and probably not a lot of time for watching those. The next thing I have are a couple technical questions I wanted to ask you all, and I'll try to keep those quick so you just have some time for Q&A and open discussion. But there's two issues that I don't know how you want to handle, and so I thought it'd be a good chance to talk about them. One is really easy, so just think about this. We might not have time to talk about it, but cell phones. Traditionally, right now, if you want a cell phone or an iPad, that comes out of your individual budget, and so I don't think many of you have cell phones. I don't know how your individual budgets work, if you have extra money at the end or if you're really stretched thin. So I just want you to think about if that should become something the assembly main budget pays for so that you can all have work cell phones. Right now you all have landlines and you're not often in your offices, so then you have to forward it to a different phone. So just
I think it should.
to think about. So think about that. And then the other topic I wanted you to have to discuss are the aids that came up a couple of times. It's not the most functional program because you have a lot more work than a part-time aide can handle. So I thought sitting members who have aids could talk about advice on how to use them and what to have them work on. And then if anyone has ideas for how to improve the program and create more resources and support for members, I'd love to hear it and see if we can reshape that program in the future.
Anyone want to kick it off? Sure, go ahead, Robin.
All right. Well, I definitely think everybody should get a cell phone. That's just my opinion. It's been good to have, and so there's that. In terms of aides, I only hired an aide in this last month because I wanted to get something done and I needed some help. And I don't look at the person that I hired as being an aide. I look at this person more as being an advisor and a mentor, because this is someone who has well more experience with me within the Muni. And I think if you look at that, and if we even maybe try and change the title so that people aren't afraid to surround themselves with people that might have more experience than them, instead of maybe people that they would use to do something that they themselves could get done. I think that's sort of a really interesting strategy. I also think it was and I'm not sure anyone else has this problem, but I'm kind of a detail fanatic, and the way that the program is set up, there's a lot of liability on the people that agree to take the aide position. And they're not hired in through HR. And I think that that's a problem. And I think that we need to solve that. I think they need to go in through HR. I think they should be covered. I think there shouldn't be any concern with, how those communications are going to go back and forth, and that I don't understand why they wouldn't be treated like everybody else. So in that regard, that's something I would do. And whoever mentioned having an aide for, I think it was Meg, for project specific aids, I think that's a great idea. And so there's my input.
Thanks. I think if you haven't all heard this yet, you'll get $2,000 a month to use on an aid or anything else you want. Phone, I bought this iPad with it. Travel, you want to go to a conference, you want to learn something, training, whatever. So really, what I've always done is spend about $1,500 on my aid a month, and then have 500 that I leave around for things like that. It's really hard to hire someone for that amount of money, and they can't work full time. Obviously, I always find myself, I've always had female aides, and I've always had to negotiate them out of overworking and having low pay. I'm like, no, actually, which is a problem in our society, right? But no, you have to work fewer hours than that. So I think that it's a challenge, because maybe you have someone working 5 or 10 hours a week. I can't remember how it all breaks down at this moment, but how do they stay engaged enough in the topics to be able to help you? Because I've mostly used it for constituent interactions. So if I can't make it to a community council meeting, having my aide go and either give a report or take notes. My aide returns as many phone calls as possible. That's because I don't like to talk on the phone if I can avoid it. And I do sometimes, obviously, but phone calls, someone calls you about one little thing, an hour later, you're trying to get to your committee meeting and you can't get there. So I find that aides are really helpful to return phone calls and answer questions for constituents. And my aide will often, if we get 100 emails about something, I'll work with her to craft a response and then she'll tailor it to what people are saying. I'll look at what they're saying, maybe give her feedback, but she can kind of execute and send some of those emails. So that's what I work with her on. But she can't respond to if someone has a nuanced question about what we're doing with some funding. It would take me just as much time to educate her as it would for me to do it. So I think maybe that's why for a lot of us, aides are sort of it's awkward, because they're not, if they work full time like Claire, they could do it, right? But if you're hiring someone part time, how do you get them up to speed and as engaged with this work that is just constantly moving and changing? So I think that, I know you guys have talked about maybe revamping the aid program, and do we, combine aides and have more like full-time staff who are helping? That might be useful. But anyway, those are just some thoughts.
Meg? Thanks. So one trick I used when I had an aide who was more general is we called her a policy coordinator, and she got a lot more return emails and phone calls that way, because there's no rule on what title you can give this person. So we just called her policy coordinator to Assembly Member Zalatel, and that seemed to work really well. So I also have used my aide, I'm a Luddite pretty much, to help me with technology. So when we had I believe it was the purchase of the Golden Lion, and I had to respond back to hundreds and hundreds of constituents. She did a mail merge, like that kind of thing, because it would have taken forever to just respond back. So there are ways definitely to kind of leverage that resource. I think that with regard to an aide in particular, I think keeping them roped in on the issues that are important to you is really, really hard. So hopefully you can find someone who shares your interests. So my current aide, which it feels like my current housing expert I've hired is already engaged on these issues and already following along. And so there isn't a lot of time having to be spent on that, and also actually has a working relationship with several people in the administration, in the planning department. And so they know, we can talk at one level, the policy level, but when it gets down into the nuts and bolts, this person can navigate it. And that to me has saved me, one, a lot of time and missteps on trying to create policy that they'll say, oh, we can't implement it that way. And two, just the trusted relationship and camaraderie and working. I'm going to have to go in a few minutes. Thank you for arranging this, Claire. And I am really sad to I'm sad and I'm optimistic. And I just want to say that because this group is amazing. And it's a privilege to be a part of it every day. When I ran for reelection last time, I was really reluctant. I had come off of a recall, and it was a big part of that was coming back to work with these folks. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Meg. Kevin?
All right, so a couple tech tips. One is if you have an AT&T phone, you can get two SIM cards. So I got one that has two SIM cards. You get a free secondary number. I have all my Muni phones forwarded to the second number, and so I can send text. If someone calls in on the Muni phone number and they're a contact, I can save them, and it will only call them through my Muni line. It won't call them through my personal line. So then you can separate, and then you can actually have a separate, which are all your Muni contacts and everything. So you can use your phone. If you're AT&T, they give you a free SIM card. It's a SIM card with 2 lines in it. They'll set it up for free. You just have to be cognizant when you save your contacts. It'll say, like, I have business and I have MOA. It says, which phone number do you want to designate as primary source? So just make sure you put your MOA one in there, and then it'll actually text through the MOA number and all that. So I just separate them completely. That way I can use one device. As far as an aid, I just waited. I'm finally at a point that I could tell somebody what I need done, but I just waited a year to just make sure that I wasn't hiring the wrong person for what I consider to be a very important position. And the second thing is, do I even know what I need them to do? So now I realize I want a researcher, kind of what Meg said. I really just want someone who's going to research things for me. And 2 is help me over communicate with community councils, which is just forward updates and here's where we're at. And the only third thing I can think that they would do is just make sure I don't drop the ball, because we're always putting out fires. Yet there's some really important things that don't get handled in 1 or 2 work sessions. They may take months and months, and something else pops up and you're like, oh yeah, you know what? I started working on that. I spent several weeks on it like 3 months ago. And where am I? So the other thing is just to have somebody in the back who says, hey, I just want to make sure that, to help me remind me of the things that I with good intention started on, but then started down all these other rabbit trails. But don't be in a rush to get an assembly aid till you can realistically put them in the right direction. And I'm just now at that point. So thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. So I've got Pete and Chris, and we have 10 minutes left. Go ahead, Pete.
Thanks, Suzanne. I actually think possibly one of the best ways to get some use out of your aid is have them be an aid for a committee you're on. If you're chairing or vice chairing a committee, have your aide come to those committee meetings and that help you be prepared for the meetings. And if you're introducing ordinances or resolutions for, from something that committee covered, the aide could help write those documents up for you. And also another thing, and they probably have already had special sessions to talk to you about this with the clerks or something, but we do have an Open Meetings Act that we have to follow. And it was quite challenging for me, having been in the legislature for 4 years before I came here, where my job in the legislature was to be totally collaborative and talk to as many legislators about every single bill as I possibly could. And so when I became an assemblyman, I realized that would get me in big trouble immediately. And so you have to sort of keep track of who you're talking to, which subject about, to not run afoul of the Open Meetings Act. And members of the public, if they see more than 2 of us in the same location, sometimes we'll walk up to you and say, you can't be here. So-and-so and so are here. And so that's happened to me on a couple occasions. So anyway, just a couple things that came to the top of my mind. Thanks.
Thanks, Pete. Chris?
Yeah, my use of staff and aid is pretty limited. I'm not a great like individual manager. I'm more of a big picture person. Be free, do what you're going to do. And what I found successful for myself is I use my aides' time when they're available to go to meetings I can't go to. And that's not just community councils, that's all kinds of meetings like the library advisory board or other places where I determine hot stuff is possibly going to happen that we should have some eyes and ears into and won't otherwise have bandwidth. And so that's been a very effective tool of late for me. And so it's not them producing work product, it's not them researching or answering calls, but just going, keeping a good record of what's actually happening. So I have a firsthand or secondhand, but very trusted knowledge. And then I also reserve a portion of my funds. I travel to NLC a couple times a year, and the assembly budget doesn't pay for that. It maybe some of it or one of those trips, but not all of it. So I'll reserve it. And there's a policy that establishes how those funds can be used. And so I try to be targeted like Meg had suggested. I will sometimes hire a specific contractor with a specific set of skills for a specific project. And that's proven to be very helpful. Like an ordinance, we established a government to government relationship with the Native Village of Inclusion and recognized all the tribes. I hired North Star Group, who provided an amazing amount of consulting as we moved through the process and helped it to be a successful project. And so you can be pretty creative within the policy.
Thanks, Chris. I think we'll need to probably move on.
On that topic of aids, the Legislative Services Office, as we grow, we're planning to start doing a more intensive aid orientation. So hopefully that will help so they at least have the resources of how to find things. So as we'll have to figure out the timing as new members get your aids of when we do that. And just the reason why they're not full-time staff is right now the budget is about $240,000 for you each to have $20,000 a year for aids, and to hire full-time staff would probably be closer to $1 million. So maybe some of you are willing to increase the assembly budget and go that route. Maybe not. So that's just something to think about as we move forward. And they have your aides use us, Legislative Services, as a resource. I know some of you have had your aides call me and I talk for an hour of here's how you can find stuff on the website. Here are the current issues. Don't be afraid to have them work with us. If they're pulling a list and need messaging, we can help show them where the messaging is. So count us as a resource for your aides. And then with that, luckily the last thing on my list was words of advice from the former and current members to the outgoing members or the incoming members. And you already took care of that. So there's 5 minutes left if you just want to do if anyone has questions or final comments.
So I would like, you should go next, Kevin. And then if incoming members have any questions too, and I don't feel like I gave my advice, but no, go ahead, Kevin.
You know, it's so important in your life to have peace, right? And so, and that's a critical attribute for your sanity and longevity. And the one thing to remember is if you look around, none of us will be here in 9 years. It'll be a completely different set of faces. And the one thing I remember is that in 9 years, everything that you've built up and worked so hard for, they could change. So do the best you can. Don't take it personally and realize the next group of people may not like anything you did and just change it completely. So, you know, smile and move on, do the best job you can, and be kind to each other. Thank you.
I'm going to jump in and echo that, to be curious and kind and respectful, and also to say that decorum is so, so important. I mean, I know a lot of times people will like make fun of the degree to which we use Robert's rules and, oh, they're doing another amendment to the amendment and they're trying to amend that, you know, but the structure is so important. And, you know, I really, after going through, you know, those of us who've been on the body for a few years, some really, really challenging times, sometimes on the dais, the importance of, you know, not talking about motive is huge, you know, and staying very focused on the issue. And then, you know, being thin-skinned too, that, yeah, you can have a really great relationship with someone and vote totally differently. And they're representing their values and their constituents. And you're all working together for that larger goal of doing what's best for the community, which is really diverse. So I think the conflict part, productive conflict is good, because then it, you know, we push each other. I mean, this is a tough group. I mean, I think that, you know, you may think that, oh, that person is an ally or whatever. But I tell you what, you bring an idea that someone else, thinks is like, okay, that's really problematic. They're going to work you. They're going to work you hard. And that's because, what's that? For months. And that's a good thing because we want the best that we can get and do for the community. And so I think like embracing that piece and being willing to like put ideas out there, have them shot down, and recognizing or that even that is part of that process of gets you somewhere bigger and better that you wouldn't have even imagined in some cases was possible if you without that just really intensive vetting collaborative process. So back to you, Claire. Well, any questions? Might be a good time, Daniel, for open mic again, or
Yes.
yeah. Just kidding. That was just from last week where we had kind of a free form kind of discussion, which was, I think it was really productive. But anybody have any questions? Assembly members aren't known for succinct answers, but go ahead. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, this is just a thought, not really a question. Not really a question. So, yeah, I have been thinking about this a lot, and we'll talk a little bit more about it Tuesday. But this group that you're seeing right now, we've been bonded through the darkest time. Like, there's a literature reference, Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship. We are the Fellowship, and the Fellowship is breaking. And that doesn't mean something new can't be born. And that quest goes on. The fight is real, and we're going to keep fighting. But you're at an interesting time. You are the first assembly after the pandemic. And this is leadership into a place where the divisions become a thing of the past and the new situation is born. And I look forward to that. I hate it and I look forward to it because these are my friends and we are tried and true. But I welcome you.
This is a really basic question, but some of those things have the blue assembly reserved parking spots. How does the parking work? I haven't figured that out yet.
We actually just realized that we could order more parking bags. We found out that security only has 3, and it wasn't that they were limiting parking. They just didn't have the bags. So Jenna from the clerk's office is ordering the bags, and we ordered 10, so there'll be plenty. So
You mean here at the library?
here, oh, and then someone else can speak to the library. But here we will have more bags, so hopefully there'll be enough spaces for everyone. Felix is questioning me.
Oh,
Yeah, because years ago we had more
We had a
bags
lot,
years ago.
yeah.
So either someone lost them or
Here's what happened. They were given to members and other people. Hey, you can keep it in your car.
oh.
And then they didn't give it back. And so they just one by one
Dick
walked
Traney
off.
has them all.
They're not
But-
supposed to walk off.
I will say that, so you don't have to have a bag to park somewhere. You are an elected official for the municipality of Anchorage. If you have a meeting here, you can park in this parking lot. And so usually we try to park, right kind of at this beginning piece, which Chris always tries to snag that spot. He likes to back in. You'll see his car there. And then along that row. But if that row is filled, I parked in one of the reserve spots. It says reserved over there. The admin doesn't love that because they want those to be reserved for them. But we have to, we have to meet. So if there's no parking, park where you will. Along the lines of getting along, learn security guards' names, be kind to them. They'll help you and they will help you figure out where to park. And they will come out and go, oh, Austin, it's you. You're fine. But if you're not nice to them, they might not do that. So it's just sort of a very good example of the lesson of treat staff well and they will treat you well.
Yes, we could all go out and meet Michael before we leave, if you haven't met Mike yet.
He's the best.
Anybody else?
Oh, we didn't talk about the library. So at the library, how would you even describe that space? When you like if Natural Pantry's here and you kind of pull in off of, yeah, veer left, and then you kind of veer right, and there's this little parking lot, and they put up a sign that says on Tuesdays, we can park there. But basically, what should we do this Tuesday?
They need to park in the main lot
Okay.
because, yeah, I don't think
Until-
there's enough
there's not.
space in there.
No, there's not, Chris, because
So-
we always fill it up and then
But if you
admin's on
curve
the other side.
around, there's a bunch of parking that says for media, but the media never parks there. And so it just starts at that corner right there. And
Yeah,
so
you can park in the
does.
media spot,
Yeah.
probably. I mean,
there's like 10 of them right there. And then it goes around to the 12, or you can park in the main lot. But
yeah, I mean, I just say in the future, you'll park in that little lot that curves around. That's really kind of across from the book drop there.
If you're wondering where it is, you can find probably some YouTube video when people
exactly.
laid down and harassed us and screamed at us and stuff. That
threatening
would be,
with weapons.
threatening with
I
weapons.
actually
yeah.
stopped parking right exactly there because of that and haven't moved back. Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Anybody? Okay, well, thank you, Claire, for putting this together, and welcome again to the new members-elect. And we'll be seeing you on Tuesday, though again, no idea yet what time you'll be sworn in. Shooting for before midnight because we have to automatically adjourn by then. It won't be that late. Well, and we'll talk to, we have planning meetings on Tuesday and figure out a way where we can, give a heads up or something too as we get close, because typically they're, before people leave, we have some speaking, talking, saying goodbye that we do that takes a little bit of time. So hopefully have a little bit of advance notice.
What does it seem like, Suzanne? It already seems like it would be probably not till 6:37 without goodbyes, which is going to take a while, and the budget if we change order of the day. So it could be 8:30, 9. Yeah.
Well, and depending how many laid on the table items,
Oh, good
depending
point.
on how big the addendum is. Depending
Did you hear
how-
that, Felix? Power's in your hands.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Hope you all have a nice weekend. We're adjourned.